We just can't get enough of Mars, can we? Everyone wants to go there, and astronauts are now looking at caves on the red planet where they can live once people inhabit it. The planet itself has some similar characteristics to Earth. Yeah, it's somewhat smaller than Earth, but the time it takes for the planets to revolve around themselves is also similar, which is about a day. On paper, Mars might seem like a good idea given some similarities to Earth, but there are some factors we need to pay attention to before we consider stepping foot there. The temperature. Mars might look like a scorching hot planet like a freakishly large Sahara Desert, but quite the opposite. It's really cold. Mars has a reputation for being a freezing, desolate, endless land that happens to have the largest mountain in our solar system thus far. So, within those mountains, astronauts and scientists are considering whether naturally built caves are the answer to our survival. Caves won't be the worst thing we'd live in considering our ancestors used to dwell in caves in communities. Logically, it's the best place to stay dry during a storm and keep warm. It's the best place for protection against predators like giant birds, elephants, and saber-toothed cats. We even had our first art shows in caves with evidence of cave art dated thousands of years ago. Caves are a good idea, and they can also help us save a lot of money when establishing a colony on Mars. Rather than building a fresh structure in the middle of an open plain, the cave structure will help and influence the architecture, potentially saving lots and lots of money. Going to Mars will be expensive. It's already expensive sending people to the moon and launching a rocket into space. So, we have to consider the logistics. Another thing to look out for is caves in the ground that are not necessarily stuck on mountains. Scientists believe that most potential places for humans to thrive are caves. These spaces are large enough to host large populations. So far, they identified 9 caves as large as football fields. So what would life look like if we lived in caves on Mars? For one thing, sunlight would be hard to access. By the time we reach Mars, we would have the best technology to maximize our lifespan in a hostile environment, which means withstanding the harsh sun rays of Mars. Most likely, we would dig through the caves further underground where oxygen would be pumped for everyone to breathe. People can walk around casually, thinking they're on Earth, and to exit the caves, you would need to wear a special suit. These cave colonies would have dormitories for people to live in and special spaces for colony meetings, entertainment, grocery markets, schools, and other places that are needed to sustain a colony. There would also be indoor farms to grow crops and raise livestock. A team of experts mapped out what some of the dwellings will look like on Mars. And just like on Earth, we will have apartments for young professionals, family homes, and luxury mansions. Some of the dwelling units would be placed on the surface and not in caves. One of the key elements of the design and architecture is how to build it around the natural light to brighten up the homes. Another element is how to deflect radiation and cosmic rays. Because Mars has such a thin atmosphere, sun rays and other hazardous objects easily enter Mars. The dwelling units also have to be sturdy to protect them from severe dust storms and extreme cold temperatures. Some of the living pods or dwelling units that are for couples or singles would have tunnels leading to a shared workspace and garden. Studies show that even being in the presence of greenery can reduce stress levels significantly. And on the red planet, we would definitely need some greenery. We can expect the family homes to be built within the caves, not necessarily underground. It would be tempting to head outside with the view of Mars, but the large thick glass would prevent anything from coming in and out. Those who are underground with a view rely on LEDs and camera systems to screen the surface landscape of Mars so it acts like real windows. And if you're bored of the surface, you can always switch the channel and watch something else as you please. Maybe a flowing river surrounded by trees, or maybe a penthouse view of all of New York. The choice is yours. There would be a driveway that leads to a garage so one can enter and exit easily. There won't really be a reason to exit the cave colony except probably to visit other cave colonies. In this case, we would have highly crafted vehicles that will take people from colony to colony on the surface. The vehicles can withstand harsh temperatures and would be constantly transporting people daily. Some people might live in a certain colony and have to commute to work every day in other colonies. Humans might not have to be working in dangerous conditions or on the surface. We would have robots that will do that for us. The thing about robots is that they don't need to be human-shaped to do a job. However, before transporting humans to space, we would need to create some human-like robots and land them on Mars. With the exact physical form, we can determine what would happen to people if they were on Mars. We would have robots for specific tasks, helping us with everything. Let's not forget artificial intelligence plays a major role in monitoring the systems and updating the functionalities of the colony. It'll know when certain systems need fixing, adjusting, renewing, and changing. We also need people to keep an eye out for anything out of the ordinary, and also to make sure people are behaving and not breaking the law. Getting to Mars would be the earliest obstacle we will face. We've already launched some robots to explore the terrain and conduct some studies. At first, we would send robots to test the conditions and to build most of the infrastructure. To build a proper colony, we would have to send out young couples willing to dedicate their lives to the future and the future of their children. It won't be easy. In fact, there would be a variety of people with different professions and specializations to help establish the colony. People would have to work and establish a local economy. We would need scientists, doctors, farmers, teachers for the children, and engineers to maintain the structure. It will take time for the colony to reach a substantial size, but it's all part of the process. Even the spaceships would need to be large and sufficient to house thousands of people traveling from Earth. Of course, by then, most of the dwelling units would have been built, and people would have already picked out their houses, depending on if they were single or if they were about to start a family. Once the colony has the necessary professionals it needs, then come the other people who wish to start their life on Mars. People would need entertainment, so musicians would find a place in the colony. We can't expect everyone to go out on a nice sunny day to the beach, but perhaps one day, when the colony is large enough, there can be an artificial body of water with the same elements as the beach. Livestock animals would also be shipped from Earth to be raised on Mars, where they can populate for our nourishment. We can also bring most of the animals and establish a wildlife sanctuary for everyone to enjoy and for the animals to thrive. For now, humans are planning on reaching the Red Planet sooner than we think, and who knows, maybe you can be one of the first people to sign up and have your own little dwelling unit far away from Earth.
Imagine something terrible happening to Earth and humans having to leave it as fast as possible, and you have to decide which planet will become your new home. Which one will you pick? Probably the first planet that comes to mind is Mars. It's relatively close. Like Earth, it's also a rocky planet. It even has an atmosphere, even though it's much thinner than what we have on our planet. But at the same time, the North Pole on Earth would seem balmy to you in comparison to Mars. On the Red Planet, the average temperature is minus 80 degrees Fahrenheit. The most radioactive areas on our home planet might seem harmless if you compare them with the surface of Mars. But what if we terraform Mars? Could we keep transforming the Red Planet until it becomes capable of supporting human life? It would be an enormous feat. Mars is an extremely dangerous place. Should you teleport there right now, without any protective suit or anything, the gas in your blood would instantly turn into bubbles. You can probably imagine the consequences. Add oxygen deprivation, cold exposure, and radiation poisoning to the equation, and well, who's next? If we still decided to terraform Mars, we would need to create a stronger magnetosphere. We've got this protective magnetic layer on Earth. It shields us from the sun's ultraviolet radiation. The Red Planet would also need a thicker atmosphere, again for protecting us from harmful space stuff better. Right now, the Martian atmosphere is almost entirely composed of carbon dioxide with tiny amounts of oxygen. For us to live there comfortably, Mars would also need to be warmer. And if we managed to somehow warm the planet up, we'd also be able to release frozen carbon dioxide. At the moment, there are vast reserves of this gas at the Red Planet's polar caps and other areas. It would help the atmosphere to become thicker, making it possible for water to exist on the surface of the planet. Right now, there is some water on Mars. The atmosphere of the red planet is too thin for this water to stay in its liquid form. But under the surface of the planet, it's a different matter. You can find water under the surface of the planet in its polar regions. The only place where this water is visible is at the North Polar Ice Cap. Also, sometimes salty water flows down crater walls and hillsides, and there are tiny quantities of water in the planet's atmosphere, but it only exists as vapor. If liquid water existed on the surface of the planet, it would make it easier for us to start growing plants, and plants, in turn, would begin to produce oxygen. But first of all, we would need to start the warming process. How? Well, Elon Musk suggests using nuclear energy to make Mars more livable. He says it could be done by creating a continuous flow of low-fallout nuclear fusion explosions above the atmosphere of the planet. It could create something like numerous artificial suns. It could warm the planet, melting the frozen ice caps, which would then thicken the atmosphere, causing even more warming. Other strategies for Martian global warming include the diversion of asteroids into the poles of the planet, or the large-scale production of greenhouse gases that could help us heat the red planet. Or we could create a giant space mirror, as huge as the side of Mars. It would reflect tons of additional sunlight onto the planet. The problem is all these projects would have exorbitant costs. They would also require serious upgrades in our technological capabilities. Could there be an easier and cheaper way of terraforming the red planet? It seems so. Casey Hanmer used to work in NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Now he's the founder of a startup hoping to create carbon-negative natural gas by pulling carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere of our planet. He's also made a proposal to terraform Mars for a modest $10 billion. Sounds alluring. So, what is his idea? Mass-produce small solar sails. These are already existing technologies, even though they appeared only recently. Such sails use sunlight to propel themselves, like ships use the wind to sail. These solar sails could be launched into low Earth orbit, and after that, they would fly themselves to Mars. There, they would reflect sunlight onto the night side of the planet. According to Hanmer's calculations, a decade of such launches could result in a 1% increase in temperature on Mars. Hanmer also believes that we could mass-produce solar cells at cell phone factories, all because a solar sail would need a processor, a camera for navigation, and some electronics to be able to transmit data, just like a smartphone. In other words, solar sails would be like small satellites using cell phone technology. Each of these sails would also need a sail of its own, a thin space blanket weighing about 2 pounds. When unfurled, it would span around the size of 2 basketball courts. Would this plan involving solar sails enable people to terraform Mars? Hanmer doesn't think so. Even if we put loads of money into solar sails, they would only make the red planet warmer and more humid, but they still wouldn't be enough to make Mars suitable for human life. Most scientists are also very skeptical about the very idea of terraforming this cold, dry world. They say that carbon dioxide and water vapor are the only greenhouse gases present on Mars, but there's just not enough of them to change the situation. Let's say we manage to melt the polar ice caps with the help of Elon Musk's nuclear technology or solar sails. And still, this ice will only release enough carbon dioxide to bring the atmospheric pressure to 1.2% of what it is on Earth. Plus, most of the carbon dioxide gas wouldn't be accessible, and we wouldn't be able to mobilize it. Even if we decided to go through an energy-intensive process of the extraction of carbon dioxide from the planet's soil, dust, and minerals, we'd still only get the atmosphere to a mere 5% of where it needs to be. Water is another problem. It is salty on Mars. It might even be as salty as the oceans on our planet. But these salts aren't what you find on Earth. If a person consumed a certain amount of them, they would be highly toxic to the human body. Who's next? On our planet, these salts are formed as byproducts of rocket fuel, as well as in road flares and fireworks. Naturally, they only occur in very dry areas. If there are no particular bacteria to break them down, these substances accumulate year after year, and their concentration in water is constantly increasing. But in theory, it's possible to purify even such water. The process of filtration could help the astronauts get rid of 90% of harmful substances. Then they could use a UV disinfection unit. This would also help get rid of any foreign molecules, if there are any, that might be hiding in the water. This stage would not only protect the astronauts, but also prevent them from bringing any dormant Martian microbes back to Earth. In other words, future travelers to Mars shouldn't have too many problems with drinking water on the red planet, but only if they bring the right purification equipment that can deal with any water quality. Because, however bad running out of water in the middle of a desert is, experiencing it on another planet sounds much more terrifying. Anyway, back to terraforming the red planet. Once you start thinking about it, some worrying questions arise. Who is supposed to decide whether we should start this process? When should we start it? What if there's some form of life on the red planet, like indigenous microbes we haven't spotted yet, and our attempts to change their home will disturb them? What if they don't survive these changes? Now, what do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments. Hundreds of spaceships take off from Earth's surface and head toward Mars. Fast forward 7 months, and this space fleet of ships is near the red planet. Soon they will all land, and a few thousand people will become citizens of Mars. Perhaps they will never return to their home planet, because there will be absolutely all conditions for a comfortable life here. It takes time and many expeditions to create a self-sustaining colony on Mars. Here is how, step by step, people might build a full-fledged city there, with factories, hospitals, apartment buildings, and even clubs and restaurants. First, we need to pick a time to launch the rocket. A launch window opens once every 780 days. That's when the distance between Earth and Mars is the shortest. In this case, the journey will take about 6 to 7 months. Let's move to the launch pad. Here, we see the spacecraft connected to a booster rocket. Ignition! The booster sends the spacecraft into the air. It then undocks and lands back on Earth. At the same time, the spacecraft's engines start and it makes its way to Earth's parking orbit. To make this ascent, the ship has used almost all its fuel and now needs refueling. To do this, we use our booster again. A huge crane places another spacecraft on the booster. There are huge fuel tanks inside the ship. The booster launches from Earth and takes the refueler into orbit. It docks with the spaceship and fills it with fuel. The journey through space may need a total of 5 such refuelings. And for the first mission to build a colony on Mars, we need 5 spaceships. So that's about 25 launches from Earth. Considering that the booster costs $230 million, the refueler $130 million, and the ship itself is $200 million, the price tag on the mission is pretty impressive. So, ignition. Fast forward in time, and the first 5 ships descend to the surface of Mars. These ships haven't brought the first humans. They carry only payloads, like fuel and water supplies, oxygen for breathing, and medical supplies. There are also first living modules, waste management systems, and a huge number of solar panels for generating electricity. Before landing, one of the ships launches a system of satellites into orbit. It'll provide communication on the red planet. So, the robots begin their work on Mars. First, a whole bunch of little rovers line up and unfold solar panels. Their total area reaches the size of 7 soccer fields. They're much less efficient on Mars than on Earth. Frequent sandstorms fill the working surface of the panels with sand. But at the same time, the strong winds of the red planet also help to wipe the sand away. Other rovers, equipped with powerful drills, begin searching for water in the Martian soil. When they find water, people will begin producing fuel. We'll combine carbon dioxide from the atmosphere with the mined water at a high temperature and under high pressure. It'll result in getting methane for rockets and oxygen for breathing. Since February 2021, Mars Perseverance rover has been testing the technology for oxygen extraction. It has a box inside. This is the Mars Oxygen IRSU experiment, also called MOXIE. This thing pulls Martian air inside and then, under high pressure, takes one atom of oxygen from carbon dioxide. Such a thing, about the size of a shoebox, can provide enough oxygen for one astronaut to breathe. But if you build the same mechanism but the size of a large factory, it'll produce oxygen for an entire colony and release the rest into the atmosphere of Mars. Another group of rovers is working to turn the surface of Mars into a landing zone to prepare for the next step in colonizing the red planet. By this time, the robotic population of Mars has been working on these tasks for 2 years and 2 months, and people on Earth have been waiting for a new flight window to open. This time, not 5, but 12 spaceships are coming to Mars. 10 of them are cargo ships, which bring construction materials, fuel, and other supplies, as well as a lot of scientific equipment and 3D printers. 2 other ships carry the first interplanetary astronauts. The doors of the spaceships open, and 30 heroes set foot on the surface of Mars for the first time in history. These people are scientists, engineers, and doctors. They have undergone a strict selection and long training to become the first people to conquer another planet. And these guys don't have a return ticket. They'll have to stay on Mars for 2 years. The astronauts live right in their spaceships and try to get used to the unusual conditions on Mars. The temperature here is about minus 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Also, the gravity on Mars is 2.5 times weaker than on our home planet. That means a person here can jump twice as high and lift heavier objects. But the muscles in human bodies have a hard time getting used to such a difference, so astronauts can't work full-time. The first thing they do is unload cargo ships and deploy life support systems. Some people are experimenting with turning Martian soil into material for 3D printers. Others are setting up greenhouses and cultivating soil to grow plants. The human waste recycling system the robots brought here is used to make fertilizer for plants. 2 more years and 2 months have passed. We see a launch of a spaceship, not from Earth, but from Mars. The 30 astronauts have completed their mission and are on their way home. It's easier for spaceships to take off from Mars because the gravitational force here is less powerful. At the same time, ships are launched from Earth. They'll bring nearly 100 new inhabitants and even more cargo to Mars. When this space fleet arrives at the red planet, the astronauts can taste the first food grown here. 3D printers begin building homes on Mars. They print outer shells from Martian soil and plant waste. These shells will protect the dwellings from solar radiation and strong winds. And inside the shells, people will build permanent houses. They're inflatable and are equipped with modules brought directly from the spaceships. These houses have living bays, research bays, and communication centers. The construction goes on for 2 more years until the next flight window opens again. Some astronauts leave Mars, but more and more people come here with every new mission. They no longer live in spaceships. There are comfortable underground houses and 3D printed shelters. Most of the food is already produced on Mars. A new generation of robots works together with farmers. Other robots help to build even more houses to accommodate the ever-increasing human population. 2 more years have passed. Various space agencies launch their missions to Mars. There are more people, more scientific equipment, and even tanks with fish. In 2035, Mars and Earth are at a record short distance, so people send a huge fleet of ships with astronauts and construction materials. By this time, the human colony looks like a small city with many interconnected domes. Its inhabitants have already begun building an underground network of tunnels to move between houses, laboratories, and factories. They've also built the first hospital. 2 years later, the population of Mars reaches the 1,500 mark. Almost all of these people will become permanent residents of the planet. 4 years and 2 more launch windows later, the first restaurant opens its doors. Also, the construction of a nuclear power plant begins. Once it's finished, the Martians will no longer need constant supplies from Earth. From above, the colony looks like a small town. There's a farming section where food is grown, a living section, and a factory district. And with each new mission, people bring more and more solar panels. Now their total area equals dozens of soccer fields. All this allows the astronauts to feel at home. They also don't have to wait for food supplies from Earth. 20 years of the human colony on Mars. Its population is now about 30,000 people. Workers begin to bring their families to Mars. The first schools are built here. 30 years. The population is already over 100,000 people. The colony's infrastructure allows it to be completely self-sufficient. People produce enough food, get enough fuel and oxygen. Around this time, the first plants start growing in Martian soil. There's more and more oxygen in the planet's atmosphere. The trees planted in greenhouses contributed to this. The greenhouse effect from all the human activity helps warm up the surface of Mars, if only a bit. People still have to wear spacesuits when they go outside. It will take many more years until people will be able to breathe on Mars like they do on Earth. Gradually, rivers and lakes will appear. Green plants will cover most of the land. And then the inhabitants of Mars will be able to go outside without an oxygen helmet and call the red planet, now green, their home.
How about a mysterious object that used to orbit between Mars and Jupiter? At one point in the early days of the solar system, it was destroyed by some catastrophic event. This space body is called Phaeton, and this planet is totally hypothetical. But some people believe that the debris the planet left behind could have formed the asteroid belt. If you like this kind of content, please give it a non-hypothetical like and subscribe. Your support is very important to us. Thank you. Now, at the start of the 19th century, people hadn't discovered the asteroid belt yet. But in 1801, one astronomer spotted the largest asteroid in our solar system, Ceres. At that time, it was believed that a planet was orbiting between Mars and Jupiter, and Ceres seemed to be a suitable candidate. But the next year, another astronomer discovered one more space object with a similar orbit. It was an asteroid that was later named Pallas. These discoveries made scientists conclude that these two objects could have been fragments of the very planet that had once been dwelling between Mars and Jupiter. The following discovery of two more asteroids, Juno and Vesta, seemed to confirm this idea. Only in the 20th century did the hypothetical planet get its name, Phaeton. It was actually a name taken from Greek mythology, meaning shining one. The hero with this name was the son of the sun deity, Helios, who rode his solar chariot across the sky every day, giving humans the heat and light necessary for survival. One day, Helios allowed Phaeton to drive his chariot. But the sun didn't manage to control the horses. Everything went wrong, and Earth was about to burn down. That's why the main deity, Zeus, had to stop Phaeton with a thunderbolt. The idea of the asteroid belt being the sad result of the planet's destruction was called the disruption theory. And of course, there were several ideas explaining the planet's tragic fate. The most obvious one is that Phaeton was hit by a large space object. It could be another hypothetical body called Nemesis. Some people believe that it's our sun's companion star. According to this theory, the sun has a small companion star that has an extremely elliptical orbit. This orbit periodically brings it close to the Oort cloud, a large sphere of icy objects surrounding the sun. This, in turn, causes a lot of mess. It might be the reason why this hypothetical companion star was also nicknamed the Death Star. It might be a red or brown dwarf. But whatever it is at the furthest point of its orbit, it's believed to be about 1.5 light-years away. The search for this star has been in progress for decades, but no one has succeeded in locating this elusive and potentially non-existent space object. Anyway, back to Phaeton. Another theory claims that the planet could have suffered some internal cataclysm which tore it apart. But these days, the disruption theory has fallen out of favor. It was replaced by the accretion theory. According to it, the asteroid belt formed in the process of gradual buildup of particles initially floating in a gaseous environment. With time, they came together to create larger masses. Gravity pulled on these particles, encouraging them to stay together and form planetesimals, tiny planet-like bodies that later form real planets. Planetesimals kept colliding with one another, eventually developing into protoplanets. Such protoplanets grow until they form planetary bodies. As the mass of objects increases, the gravitational forces acting between particles become stronger too, continuing to build gas, dust, and ice within the nebular disk. It all has a snowball effect where the increase in mass results in more particles getting involved in the process. Eventually, there's no building material left, and large space objects float in the darkness of space. Now, many experts think that the asteroid belt is the remains of the protoplanetary disk which had once been orbiting the Sun before the planets formed. Unfortunately, it never had a chance to coalesce into a planet because Jupiter's gravitational effect prevented it from happening. In any case, even though Phaetons was a good story, it's not popular anymore.
Have you ever wondered what it would be like if every planet in our solar system was the size of Earth? Well, it's time to dive into this mind-boggling scenario. Let's imagine what each planet would look like if they were as big as our beloved blue planet. Would the barren red landscape of Mars suddenly become a lush green oasis? Would the massive swirling gas giant Jupiter just disappear? And how would it affect our solar system as a whole? Are we all doomed? Buckle up and let's find out. The first planet on our list is Mercury, the smallest planet in our solar system. But now, forget about the moon-like Mercury. Instead, picture yourself on the surface of a super dynamic incandescent inferno. There are a lot of craters and active volcanoes around you, and right in front of you is a huge, blinding bright sun. What a nightmare! But let's break these changes down. Well, along with the size of Mercury, both its mass and gravity would increase. In that case, it's possible that Mercury would have more atmosphere. Temperatures on Mercury are extreme, not only because it's very close to the sun, but also because of its very thin atmosphere. So during the day, the temperatures there reach 800 degrees Fahrenheit, and at night, it becomes terrifyingly cold, down to negative 290 degrees Fahrenheit. But now, when the gravity is stronger, Mercury could have a denser atmosphere, so the heat would be better distributed across the planet. And the atmosphere isn't the only thing that could make it hotter. If Mercury became bigger, it would likely experience increased internal heating due to gravitational compression. And hypothetically, its tectonic activity could increase. In other words, more interesting landscape, more mountains, and more scary active volcanoes. Congratulations, you've turned Mercury into Venus 2.0. For us, all these changes wouldn't be very pleasant. Now it would become much harder to send our spacecraft there, so it's better for Mercury to stay as it is, small, calm, and boring. Basically, the complete opposite of our next planet, Venus. So what would happen to Venus if it was Earth-sized? Actually, nothing. It wouldn't change at all because Venus is already almost the size of Earth. It's even called the Earth's twin, although twin is a big word, of course. In reality, we couldn't be more different. Venus is often called the morning star because it's so bright and visible in the sky. But don't let its beauty fool you. This planet is one of the most inhospitable places in our solar system. Its surface is hotter than a freshly baked pizza, around 900 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's covered in thick clouds of sulfuric acid that would dissolve any human who tried to visit. So, unfortunately, you won't be planning any trips there anytime soon. So let's move on to a planet that, unlike Venus, could potentially become a new home for us, Mars. Picture yourself standing on Mars's surface, watching the blue sunset and breathing in a refreshing breeze of air. Yes, you read that right, air. Moreover, you could be surrounded by plants, animals, and basically feel like you're on Earth. But how is that possible? Bigger Mars would have a stronger magnetic field and gravity. This would lead to a richer and denser atmosphere. It would likely have a wider range of gases, including oxygen. Wouldn't that be cool? Also, a denser atmosphere could distribute heat across the planet, so Mars would become much warmer and cozier. And here comes the most important change: liquid water. Mars actually has some frozen water at its poles and in subsurface reservoirs. But with a stronger gravitational pull, it could potentially stabilize liquid water on its surface. Hooray! However, it's not all fun and games. New Mars would also have a volcanic personality. It's already geologically active, but now its internal heat and pressure would skyrocket. That means more frequent and more crazy volcanic eruptions. Imagine how exciting it would be to witness such eruptions on another planet, if you managed to escape the consequences. In general, the planet could become greener and lusher, but not safer, although it would still be great to see it. But it's time to move on to the giants of our solar system. And if we're enlarging the planets before, now it's time to squeeze them really, really hard. If Jupiter became 11 times smaller, oh boy, what a disaster that would be. The first thing we'd notice is a change in gravity. And I say we'd notice because now we'd have no choice but to move somewhere. Jupiter experiences from 30 to 100 collisions with large asteroids per year. No big deal. All because of its strongest gravity, which attracts them all and protects us. But now our big protective brother has turned into a small baby. Say hi to a bunch of asteroids. Oh, and say bye-bye to Jupiter. This planet is known for its thick, swirling atmosphere. But with a weaker gravitational pull, Jupiter would probably have a hard time holding on to it. So over time, it would slowly escape into space, leaving behind a thin atmosphere composed mainly of nitrogen and oxygen. We'll also have to bid farewell to the iconic appearance of another giant, Saturn. The most noticeable difference would be the disappearance of its famous rings. Made up of small particles of ice and rock, the rings are a unique feature of Saturn. But with Earth's gravity, they would either fall onto the planet or scatter into space. Bummer. Saturn is also a gas giant, just like Jupiter. Its atmosphere is made up of mostly hydrogen and helium. But if it were Earth-sized, its gases would be compressed due to the increased gravity. This would make it much denser. That means Saturn's overall size and shape would change. Theoretically, if we squeeze Saturn hard, it could potentially become a brown dwarf. It's a type of failed star that lacks the mass to sustain nuclear fusion, but emits heat and light. So, Saturn could stop being a planet altogether. The weather on it would probably have changed too. All its crazy storms, such as the famous hexagonal storm at its North Pole, would have become weaker and calmer. The next giant is Uranus. Let's try to compress this poor fella. First off, the surface gravity on Uranus would be much weaker than it is now. Its atmosphere might also change. If Uranus was smaller, it could have a thinner atmosphere and different gases altogether. This planet is pretty chilly, with an average temperature of -353 degrees Fahrenheit. Ugh. But if it was the size of Earth, it might actually warm up a bit due to its reduced volume to surface area ratio. Don't get too excited though, it would still be way colder than the coldest spots on Earth. As you can see, gas giants don't easily go through all this shrinking, except perhaps one of them. Surprisingly, small Neptune would become much friendlier. For starters, it would probably be a rocky planet with a tiny atmosphere. That means no more gas giant, but instead, a planet that's easier for humans and critters alike to live and move around on. Speaking of movement, because of the smaller size, the gravity on this new Neptune would be almost the same as Earth's, making it a heck of a lot easier to walk and jump around. No more floating away into space. Now, the atmosphere of the original Neptune is so thick you could barely see your hand in front of your face. And the surface pressure is about 100 times that of Earth's atmosphere. But our new Neptune would be much different, with a much thinner and less dense atmosphere. It would still have some methane, water, and ammonia in it, but nowhere near as much as before. Finally, the temperature. The current Neptune is freezing, with an average temperature of about -370 degrees Fahrenheit. But if it was the same size as Earth, it would likely be much warmer, just like Uranus. Ah, that's more like it. What a planet that would be. That's it for the changes in the planets. But what would happen to the entire solar system if we made all the planets so small? It's hard to predict, but it's clear that their gravity and orbits could change a lot. It's unlikely that any of them would have flown into outer space, or crashed into each other, or something like that. But many of their orbits would probably become quite unstable, and the number of collisions with asteroids would have increased significantly. Of course, all this is purely speculation. It's not like we can actually test all this. But it's still a pretty interesting thought experiment, and it makes you appreciate just how unique and special our solar system really is.
Imagine all the planets from the solar system had a meeting and decided that Earth should move to another galaxy. Then what? Well, my friends, if Earth got kicked out of the solar system, let's just say we'd be in for a bumpy ride. As you may know, each planet occupies its own orbit in relation to the Sun, guaranteeing the perfect functioning of our solar system. But it wasn't always like this, though. Billions of years ago, planets and asteroids kept constantly bumping into each other. It took some time before each planet found its own personal orbit, and our system took the formation it has today. Now, as you may know, the most important organizing factor of the solar system is gravity. Gravity attracts every piece of matter to every other piece of matter in the universe, and the bigger the mass, the bigger the gravity. The Sun makes up 99.75% of all the mass in the solar system. It's precisely the Sun's gravitational pull that has kept Earth on a steady and reliable path. But it wouldn't take a surreal interplanetary meeting for Earth to go rogue. This is an actual possibility, an unlikely but real one. For instance, if any rogue planet or star were to travel close to the solar system, its gravitational force could mess up our planetary organization. And did you know that this has actually happened before? Some 70,000 years ago, a red dwarf passed through the Oort cloud and messed things up. The Oort cloud is an outer circle of space debris located on the edge of our solar system. It lies far beyond Pluto and the Kuiper belt and surrounds the Sun in a giant spherical shell. Apart from the 8 planets and the Kuiper belt, there is another asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Now, scientists expect another red dwarf to pass by our solar system. It's an orange star from the constellation of Serpens Cauda. Astronomers expect it to pass near the Sun in about 1.29 million years, at a distance of about 99 billion miles. This star has about 60% of the mass of the Sun, which would be enough to cause a great disturbance in our system. Once the star entered our system, we'd be able to see it in the night sky without any equipment. It would be like watching a small orangish dot appearing in the sky. Over the months, it would grow bigger and bigger until we'd see it during the daytime. At a certain point, it would become so big and bright that we wouldn't be able to look at it directly. Just like people say we shouldn't do with the Sun, but we look at it directly anyways, right? At this moment, the night sky would fill with an eerie red glow, and after a few months, the orange star would start shrinking again, turning smaller than the Sun. But then, wait, the Sun is turning smaller too. Well, yes. The passing of Gliese 170 took Earth out of its orbit, and its gravitational force pulled us out of our natural alignment. Now the Earth will roam through the solar system until it reaches outer space. So, what would happen with our planet if this were to really happen? First, the Earth would leave what is known as the Goldilocks zone, also known as the habitable zone. It's a rather narrow part of the solar system where human life can thrive. What's its success secret? Water in a liquid state. Astronomers have discovered that Mercury also has water, but only in its northern and southern poles, where light never reaches. Pluto, the dwarf planet at the rear end of the solar system, is 30% water, but much of it is hiding under a thick layer of ice. If the Earth ever did leave its privileged place orbiting the Sun, it would travel around the galaxy at its orbital speed of 67,000 miles per hour. That's 1,000 times faster than a cheetah can run. Pretty fast, huh? So, in about more or less a month, humanity would see the red giant Mars on the horizon. By then, we would be getting around 44% of the sunlight we once had. If someone wanted to begin a new civilization, this would be the perfect moment. With reduced sunlight, it would be more difficult for plants to continue doing photosynthesis, so most of the flora on our planet would begin to perish. A few days after leaving Mars's orbit, our planetary spaceship would face its first challenge, traveling through the asteroid belt. It's a collection of small, rocky, metallic bodies. They're basically leftovers from the Big Bang that created our solar system 4.6 billion years ago. So, in a way, it's almost like we were traveling in time, right? Luckily for us, the distance between one asteroid and the next is about 600,000 miles. So, after passing one asteroid, it might take us a while before running into the next. If we make it through this journey intact, then we'll see the first gas giant in our galaxy, Jupiter. Up until this moment, our loyal moon has been following us as we travel inside the solar system. But, Jupiter's huge mass might steal our moon away from us. After all, Jupiter's gravity is twice as strong as Earth's. If our moon did join Jupiter's orbit, it would be no less than its 80th moon. A bit too many moons, if you ask me. At this point in our travels, the Earth's atmospheric temperature would have fallen drastically to around -229 degrees Fahrenheit. So life on Earth would only be possible in very specific places. Most of our planet's water would be frozen at this point, but only on the surface. Thanks to the Earth's core activity, it would heat our oceans from below, allowing heat to escape and maintain some water in the liquid state. In fact, the Earth's core would remain active for billions of years after it has left orbit. In this scenario, microbes living near hydrothermal vents would thrive. But perhaps some life would also be possible near the heat provided by thermal vents above the surface, in places like Yellowstone Park. A great option for humanity would be to build cities deep underground. This would be our best bet if we wanted to keep human life on planet Earth. 10 years after our departure, we would be deep into the interstellar voyage. We'd be over 2.8 billion miles from the sun. Our solar system would be nothing but a distant memory. If you were still living on Earth at that point, then you'd probably be coexisting with great technological advancements. Humans could build entire underground cities using geothermal energy. Maybe we'd even discover how to turn ice into power and create a sustainable and abundant system for fuel. Ice would also be our main source of water, and by then, the transformation process wouldn't be as expensive. Underground crops would thrive, but some plants would be better than others. Moss, fungi, and algae would be some great alternatives, as they are much easier to farm and grow in large numbers. This would mean that most of our diet would be plant-based, as it might be hard to keep grazing animals under the ground. Humanity could go on living thousands of years this way. If Earth happened to pass by some star with a habitable planet, we might even attempt to make a home on another planet. Spaceflight would become easier without the atmosphere in the way. So, the idea of venturing into other planets would no longer seem too surreal in this scenario. The only thing that we would rather not happen to us is Earth running into a black hole. If that happened, let's just say we'd all be turned into spaghetti. Not literally, but we would go through a process that is called spaghettification. In this case, planet Earth, and everyone still living on it, would be vertically stretched up to the point of, vanishing. But that's the subject of another video. Fortunately, even if all this could be true, we wouldn't be caught by surprise. Thanks to scientific and technological advancements, we would be able to predict if a star were to pass too close to our home planet. And even if we couldn't stop a star, we would most certainly manage to do everything to prepare. So, who knows? Maybe the future generations will be watching this video, surprised at how precisely we figured the future out.